Hello everyone, welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. I'm Richard Carlton, creator of fmtraining.tv, where we do lots of awesome FileMaker training here at, well, every day at 1 o'clock. And so that's what we're doing today. We're picking up the conversation yesterday about the Execute SQL statement. It's a very exciting capability. It's part of the FileMaker platform. It's been around for a while. It's decidedly a little bit more advanced. So if you're depending upon where you're at, you might be a more basic person, which this is probably going to be a little bit complex for you to dig into. I would say that you need to be in this range over here between intermediate developer and a senior developer to really want to play with this. If you're brand new to the FileMaker platform, you're a manager and you just kind of use FileMaker and kind of maybe manage other FileMaker people. You know that this exists, but you don't care how it works. They just tell them to make it work. If you're a brand new developer, you're just learning the FileMaker platform, then probably save this conversation, this recording for another day. Speaking of recordings, this is being broadcast in 1080, simulcast to Twitch and to YouTube at the same time. You can comment and ask us questions in real time. We will see those questions over here, both in YouTube and Twitch. And so if you see me over here, I'll be talking to you. And then today's guest speaker is Calvin Mosiman. He'll be joining us in a second. I do want to point out that if you would like to support this channel, we greatly appreciate everything you do. You can come over here to fmtraining.tv. If you press the live button here, you can see the upcoming schedule of the events coming up. If you press the bundles right here, you can actually see the training bundles that we make available for you. This is our paid content. It's not live, but it's animated. So we do take time to animate it and explain things. And it's really great. If you want to support the channel, that's how you do it. I know it's free training and it's free is great, but if you buy this or keep it subscribed or up to date, this is how we pay the bills and keep the lights on. So we really appreciate all that for being here. So Calvin, are you kind of ready to pick up the SQL conversation? Are you there?
Yes. Yes, I'm here, ready to continue talking about the using the Execute SQL function in FileMaker.
Why don't you show us your face real quick, Calvin? We'd love to see who you actually are. Who are you?
I think I have to turn off my screen first.
Yeah, there you go. There's Calvin. Welcome, Calvin, once again, senior engineer from the East Coast. So what time? It's was it like 4:10 there? About
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock, a little after 4 o'clock. Yeah, so you're early. TK55678 at Air Traffic Control buying complete bundle. Will people be able to upgrade to 19 release? Yeah. If you have the subscription from us, it's a subscription, which means that everything through that year you get. That's part of that bundle. If you have the complete bundle, you get all the video training, our tools, starting point enhanced, version 8, which has got some minor improvements to it. We'll have that within the next week or two. And obviously, when the new FileMaker comes out, you would get that too, right? So that's part of that. If you get just the video-only bundle, then you don't get the new FileMaker because you already probably have that through some other license some way. Or maybe your company has a 5-pack. And if you have licensing questions, you need help with licensing, just email support because Ryan is here and he'll be happy to help you with that. So we do license support, we do server installs, we do pretty much everything. So if you have a question about FileMaker, you're stuck, you can't find it, just email support and we will get you dispatched and handed to the right person. So yes, you can get, if you have a current subscription, you will get 19 when it comes out. Now, with the day it comes out, there might be a day or a couple day delay in it. I'm just going to warn everyone up front because FileMaker has to send updated downloads to everyone. We have to get it, package it up, and shoot it off to you. So if, say, FileMaker 19 ships, pick a day, whatever day, then T-minus like 2 to 3 days later, you'll actually have it. We'll be talking about it, of course, immediately, but and I know everyone wants to play with it, but I think generally there's some neat things in it. It's a much bigger release than previous releases, but I don't think that anyone who doesn't have it immediately is going to be at a negative detriment. There's some new things to learn in it. It's pretty cool, but you know, the world will not quit spinning if you don't have it on day one. So I always kind of caution people on that. So 15 minutes from Heathrow. Okay, cool. Greetings from New Jersey. Awesome as well. Okay, cool. So Calvin, are we ready to rock and roll? We're going to transfer that to you.
We're ready to go.
Switching to full screen. You've already dialed your screen to the correct size, which makes it
I have.
much easier for everyone. The text should be easily readable. I'm going to put your window down in the corner, Calvin. We can see that right there if you want to kind of hide that out of the way somewhere. There you go. Cool. All
All
right.
right.
Go.
So
Go.
the
Launch.
this
Off.
is the same file I had yesterday, but I've made some improvements and made it just a little bit easier to read the queries that we put in here. And just to kind of recap from yesterday, we are running an ExecuteSQL function, and this is what it looks like here. And that's calling our query field, whatever we type in there, and putting the result in a results field. And this is what the function looks like. ExecuteSQL, here's our where you put the select statement. Then you have an option for a field separator, row separator, and additional what we call arguments. So I'm going to say OK, and go ahead and save that and close this and get back to where we were. And so we start off simple. We have this select, and this the star just means select everything from names. I'll say run so we can see that. And once again, we're seeing we're pulling all of the contact data. We see names, we see addresses. It's kind of in this block of data that's not really readable, but it's really usable for something like a virtual list or passing it to another program. So let's go. Let's see. We built onto that where we put a where in there, where we could limit what we were looking at. So instead of grabbing all the data, we're grabbing only data where the state value is California, and we could even just specify what fields that we want, and maybe put a couple fields in there. And so we can specify what fields we want and what data we want, and limit that. And so the next one that we're going to look at is kind of where the conversation left off, and this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. And here we're doing a join. And one of the neat things that we talked about yesterday is that with the ExecuteSQL, it's in FileMaker, we're used to being bound by the context of the layout that we're working in. So if we go into layout mode here, we'll see we're in the SQL queries table. Each record's a different query, and we'd be bound by that. And if we look in the database relationships, we'll see that we've got 4 tables. None of these are related, but we're pulling things from other tables because the ExecuteSQL function is not bound by the context. So we're telling it where we want to pull something from. But what if you want to pull something from 2 different tables and there's no context between them? We add what's called a join. And so if you're familiar with FileMaker, a join would be like a relationship. And if you think about it that way, we can see that we're selecting, and then we've got a number of fields here, 3 fields, from and names. That's the first table. And then join, we're joining names to another table, which is invoices. And on, that's where we line up our IDs or whatever fields we want to line up. ID name equals ID name. And you'll notice here, before each field, I have the letter A before first name and last name, and B next to total. And those A's and B's correspond with which table it's pulling from. Let's go ahead and run this to see if it works. And it works. So we grabbed each contact from our names table and grabbed the total of all of their invoices for each of those people without needing a summary field, without needing a relationship. And you'll see for this data set, which is we've got 500 name records. And if we look over here, I'm not sure how many invoices. We've got about 500 invoices as well. It ran pretty fast. It's running locally as well. So we've got that additional level of complexity that we're adding there to grab information from multiple tables. the next step that we'll look at is another option where we have this. This was just a regular join. The next one we're going to look at is a left join. So if you think about it like the field that the table that we talked about first is on the left. We read from left to right, and the table that we're joining to is on the right. We're looking at everything in the left table and grabbing it, information from the right table. So you'll notice here, when we did this for this regular join, we in every case there's a name included and there is an amount included. So we only have names for people that have invoices. But if we look at this with the left join, we have some names that don't have invoices. So this can be really important for running some kinds of reports where you want to see where the value is 0. Sometimes you want to see only options, only data that has values. That maybe you only want to see people who have an invoice for the last year or for an give in the app. But sometimes you want to see everybody, whether they have an invoice or not. And this, using that left join, gives you all the values from the name or from that left table, and shows you and gives you more information from the right table or the invoices if it exists. And there's a nice visualization. Again, I'm pulling up w3schools.com that kind of gives us this visualization of how those tables work. So what we just showed you was a left join. We're getting all of the information from table 1 and whether it has information in table 2. And the first join that we showed only included information when both existed. So this w3schools.com is really helpful in trying to figure out some of these things. So we'll go to the next one. And in this case, it's getting a little more complicated. So now we're pulling from 3 tables. We've got names, we've got invoices, and we've got staff. So we've got 3 tables we're looking at. And we'll show you again in relationships that we've got staff, invoices, and names. Those are the only 3 tables that have record data. And let's go ahead and run this and see if that works. So here we have the first and last names, the invoices, the invoice amount, and who the salesperson was on that particular invoice. And so these as you add to your select statement, it can get pretty complicated, and you can add a lot of different information in there, and to generate reports and such. So if we have any questions,
okay. Michael's asking A and B question mark. So A and B question mark.
So over here we have A prefixing each of these fields. So it's like an abbreviation, I guess. And by putting the A after names here, it's telling us that A means names. So you'll notice in some of these, I'll put these 2 windows next to each other. Here, I'm not giving an abbreviation to names. I'm actually saying table name, field name, table name, field name.
You're almost like defining a variable there, like, or just naming it, right? So
right.
Okay.
So that's a common way to do it. In when you do it this way, and actually I wrote this with a calculation in FileMaker. So it's harder to read when you have and those select statements can get really long. So often we'll see it abbreviated so that we can, or those variables set so that it's a shorter and a little easier to read. And I believe we looked at it yesterday in the SQL Explorer file from Seed Code with John Sindelar. It's a free download. You should check it out. He in all of his examples, he was using that abbreviation, and so for what for running these select statements. So here we'll see the a company name is pulling from companies, which is marked with as A. So that's how the A and B work in there. So in these other cases, though, I used a calculation to write the select statement, which is a little easier to debug instead of typing it out. Yesterday, when I was just trying to type everything in real fast, I got caught up on mistyping some things, and one little space or one little probably actually not a space, but just changing something like the comma that I just removed from there messes everything up. So, or misspelling a word can mess it up as well. So it's nice to have some functions in there that will generate those select statements for us. So if we have this is some of the neat things we can do with the joins. And from here, I'd like to go to some sampled files that we have and show how I'm using FileMaker calculations to create these select statements.
Okay, before you go there, we do have a couple questions. So I think John was saying that it's the A and B thing is like an alias, is another way of calling it like that, I think.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, that's that's an Apple term or Mac term. And then David was saying, I'm wondering where the sandbox is. I could not get on yesterday. I think he's talking about the SQL Explorer thing. You want to show everyone where that's at?
So the SQL Explorer is at this link right here. So if you go to seedcode.com /FileMaker-SQL-Explorer, that will take you there.
Awesome. Everyone have that?
And so that's the SQL Explorer, and then if we could send this out as well, but this is just there's not a whole lot to it. Any other questions there?
No. TK55678 says, do you mean the Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's the SQL Explorer. So I'm assuming that's what he meant. If he didn't mean it, he will tell us again in a second.
Right. I called this file sandbox just because it's kind of a place to type these things out and mess around with SQL.
That's fine. David was saying I could not get on, wondering where the sandbox, as I could not get on yesterday. I don't know. He's either talking about this file or the SQL Explorer. I mean, this file we'll make available at the end of the broadcast today. Actually, I can work on getting that cooked up right now, probably for you guys. If you want to keep talking, Calvin, I can kind of wire that in the background here.
So this is FM starting point, and we do use the Execute SQL select statements in here limitedly, and we have it specifically in our calendar. So whenever you open a calendar or make adjustments to it, there is a select statement in the background running, and it generates the list of events for this to display in the web viewer. So if we go to info and events, we'll see this is actually the result. It doesn't look the same because we're pointing it to a field that saves each event as a JSON object. But let's see how that works. So I'm going to go to Open Script Debugger and say refresh. And we will see here, down here on line 27, we're setting a variable that is calendar, and it runs the Execute SQL to gather a list of JSON objects. So I'm just going to press play till we get there, and we'll see. I want to show you two things in the web viewer real quick, maybe after we run that. Two things in the web viewer, and that is, first of all, we've got our result, which is just calendar, and there's a list of all of the events that were generated from that select statement. And here's the select statement itself. So it says select calendar JSON. That's the field, the calculation field that stores that JSON object, or the calendar information as a JSON object. From, there's our table occurrence, tasks, where flag on calendar is greater than 0. So we only want things that we flagged to show on the calendar. Now, every time I run this, it saves the latest query in a global variable. So I'm going to change this to orange. We don't have any orange. Do we have blue? Let's see something that actually has a value in there. So let's go ahead and look at how the query changed because I selected a category. So now we have select that field, the calendar JSON, from tasks, where flag show on calendar is greater than 0 and category equals installations. And we can, if we assign a user as well, let's go ahead and add one task so we can know what this is specific. This category is going to be blue, and this is going to be assigned to John Smith. Okay. So there's our new task. We'll say John Smith and category's blue. There's our event. And if we go to the data viewer and look at our query, now that query's expanded and it's selecting the field where flag show on calendar is greater than 0, category is blue, and staff name's John Smith. So all of this is being generated in a calculation, with a calculation in a set variable script step. Let's go ahead and look at that.
Okay, take a breath, slow down. So David says, spot on, this is a great toy to play and learn with. That's the SQL Explorer. SQL is great for getting data out of our ERP system, but not managing it with FileMaker. So it's SQL has its practical applications. It's really great. You have to be selective about where you use it. Great. Keep going, Calvin. Doing great.
Okay, so I just copied out of FM starting point the calculation that I used to generate this select statement. So here let's walk through it, and then we'll kind of see how things are working. So here's our field that we want, and for each of these fields that we're interacting with, we set a variable in the let statement so that we can reference it later on and kind of simplify how these work. So here is the actual query. Select, and then what we're selecting, which points to this, and then from, this table, which points to our table up here. Where, and then we have our where down here, there's a few if statements we'll look at. So we're using a couple custom functions here that allow us to take a field in the calculation and pull out just the field name or just the table occurrence name. And the true here is telling us whether or not we want quotes on it. Let me go ahead, and what I'll do here is in our result, just so we can see this, I'm going to put the query, and I'm going to, so we can see what I like to do, especially in the script debugger, is have the results in my let statement, the query along with the execute SQL, and then I can kind of compare and see what's happening. Okay, this is my select statement first, and this was the result. And often if you run into a problem, just looking at the select statement, you can see maybe something wasn't, a field wasn't formatted right, maybe we're missing quotes in some spot, and it will help us to identify where the problem is. Or if we got no results, maybe we're looking for the wrong value. So once we have the rest of this criteria, we're using to define our where, and each part of the where in the select statement is we're setting that in an if, so that based on what the user enters in those global fields to see in the calendar, it changes the statement right there, so that we can see those changes reflected in the data set that we gather. So here we're saying category is blue and staff name is John Smith. If the category were empty, or if the category equaled all categories, there wouldn't be any specification. If the staff name were empty, or if staff were all users in that selection field, then there wouldn't be we wouldn't be defining a where for the staff. And that allows us to change our select statement based on the user's interaction with the interface. So what we could do now is take maybe an example of this format and use this to create one of these other select statement in the sample file that I had over here, our ExecuteSQL sandbox. So I'm going to go ahead and say new in the data viewer. And actually, I don't even have my custom functions in here. So I'm going to say import, or I'm going to say file manage custom functions. And we're going to say import. And I'll grab my copy of FMSP 7, which hopefully shows right up. There we go. And we want these two, the field reference get field and field reference get TO. We'll import those. Okay. And let's go ahead and open this up. And so now that we have this custom function in, we can say, instead of JSON, let's just say we're going to select, and we'll just say this is the field that we want. And we'll grab this from names. And we'll say we want maybe the email addresses. And we want it from the table. We can select the table there as well. We're not going to do a where at showing calendar we don't need. Most of the rest of these we won't need for this. And I'm just going to disable the where for now. And let's go ahead and try that. So we're going to select evaluate, see what our query looks like, and see if there are any results. It says table can't be found. So we just need to make sure our variables in the let statement match. It says something else is missing. Okay. So here I need to remove this and. So here's our select statement. Let's put another return in there so we can separate them a little bit. So we just selected email from names, and there's our list of email addresses. And what's really nice about this is that if the name changes in the app, then this calculation will change. So let me go ahead and copy this. Select email from names. I'll say monitor. And we're going to create a new record here. I'll paste this in, and we'll say run. It gets the same result, but have we ever changed field names in our app? I know I change field names all the time. So maybe we want to change the email to primary email. And I'll say change, and we'll say OK. And now let's see if our script, the run, still works. And we get this question mark. And the question mark can be really frustrating when working with the select statement. But if we look at our data viewer and see that calculation that we put together a second ago, and say evaluate, specified field cannot be found. Well, okay, let me So because this is in the data viewer, it didn't update. That was my issue here. So let's go ahead and put in primary email. If this were part of the app, then it would have updated automatically. So let me go ahead and I will put in a button here and just.
Yeah, I mean, so PIZ Soto Diego says the can execute SQL be used to create value lists, and of course that's kind of what you're doing here, right? That I mean, technically a value list you'd have to populate. You'd have to populate the data into a field that is referenced by the value list. If you understand how value lists work, value lists can either be static or they can be based on records in a table, right, Calvin?
Right. So if I were to use Execute SQL to generate a value list, I would be using Execute SQL to set a field with the list of values, and then that value list would be pointing to that field, probably in like something like a preferences table. So so it could be used to generate a value list, and yeah, I can see that working. I'd be curious the use case, but it's definitely a possibility. A lot of times, I guess in preferences, we'll have different fields tracking dynamic value lists that you want people to be able to change without using the edit option in the drop-down list, and so that would be a way to do that. Okay, so I put my calculation in here in a dialog. So this is part of the app, and we'll see we selected primary email from names. And so let me go ahead and change the email back. I've said primary email, and I'll change this. And we'll say test, and now it says select email from names. So this brings up something that's really important when you're doing this, and that is when you're writing select statements in FileMaker, and that is that you don't want to hard code those names. You want to use a calculation to write it, and so that it's not fragile. And I ran into an instance not too long ago where a client was doing putting select statements in their app, and a field changed, and it broke the whole thing, and we went through and had to rewrite those statements using calculations so that they wouldn't be fragile, and so any changes to the app itself wouldn't break it. So we can say okay here. I'll say run, and we'll see that that's working again. So that's one use case in the calendar, and that's one way of doing it. We're using the field ref get to and field ref get field name. The other example that I have here is in the chart demo, and so it's I guess I'm showing two different techniques for writing these select statements. And in this case, I'm using a different set of custom functions. And so here it's a little simpler to read, and we have our select area up here, and then we're substituting the fields that we need into that select statement at the top. So let's go ahead and copy this, and we'll paste it over here in our data viewer and make some adjustments to it based on the sample data in the sandbox one. So maybe we want to summarize let's go ahead. Maybe we want to summarize the fields in, I think it's called total. So we'll say this is total, and I'll make the name match down here, total. Where the total is greater than 0. And we want to pull this from this table. So we'll say grab it from this table. So if we look at this, these custom functions, GTFN is get table field name, and then GTN is get table name. And if I say execute, we'll get a total of all of the, we get a summary of all of those values. Now, if I disable these first two comments here, then we can see what that select statement would look like. And it would actually, if we say monitor and new over here, pasting that right in here will give us a result. And that's the total of all of the invoices in the 500 invoices in that data set in our invoices table. So there's a lot of, we're able to do that without a summary field. It's really powerful feature being able to pull data like that. And it's really important that we do it in such a way that we don't cause frustrations for ourselves, and we do it in such a way using the calculation engine to generate the query so that we can so that our code won't break in the next day or the next week.
Okay, so I don't know if the Top Cat's playing with me or not. It says, yesterday Calvin said he wants to show SQL in the graph file. How to get the data via SQL.
So so this is the graph, the chart demo. Is that what he's talking about? So each of these graphs is the data is generated with a select statement. So if you look at here, that's what we just we're looking at how that works. So we use a let statement. We kind of format what our select statement will look like, and we have these placeholders. So amount, invoice, and then our where. And then we insert with a substitute those values using this custom function to insert that data right up here. And so when we run this, let's go ahead and go back over to the data viewer. Then and let's select the other, I'll say cancel. When we go back to the data viewer and look at this, it puts this text here and from the let statement into a select statement, and then runs that select as execute SQL and with the execute SQL, and then that's a result is used. All we're doing with the result in the chart is we're setting it in a field, and here's a list of all our fields. So each of these fields have is based on that select statement. So let's go ahead and just look at maybe the states. And if we go back to our chart record or chart script, and we want to look at the state names. So here, I'll copy the state names calculation, and we'll open our data viewer so we can see it. Not the script debugger, the data viewer. And paste that in here. Let's go ahead and enable these two lines so we can see what that looks like. So the first, this is the select statement right here. And you can see it looks pretty long just because we've got a few different, we're telling it to group by and order by. And then here's our result, CAFLNY. We're going to say monitor. And we'll see that corresponds directly with our chart field here, CAFLNY. If we select the next one, so I'm going to go with the chart counts. Here we're doing a sum, And if we go back over here to the data viewer, I'll paste that in here. And there's our summarized data. We can see what that select statement looks like. We're summarizing ID constant because we're just getting the count. And we want it only when there's a value greater than 0 in the total. And then we're grouping by state and sorting by state. So our numbers are 332, 130, 107. And that will correspond with our field over here, the state fields, 332, 130, 107. So each of these graphs are pointing to one of these fields, and these fields are being set in this script using a select statement that is generated using a calculation. So if we change any of the fields, it won't break the graphs.
Perfect. All right, so we do have a couple questions here. There were some questions. I guess some folks were. I'm assuming HBH and Pisa Soto weren't around yesterday. This is part 2 of our broadcast, but so they're asking questions that we kind of covered yesterday, which is, what is the difference between SQL and like Microsoft SQL and like Oracle and the one in FileMaker, right? So that one's pretty easy, Calvin. I'll let you.
Yeah. So when we're saying execute SQL, we only have the option of running a select statement or executing a select statement. And so this is a real simple example of what a select statement looks like. And it's running it on the FileMaker data. So FileMaker translates that select statement into something that FileMaker can read, grabs the data, and then delivers it back in a format that would reflect something similar to something like what you would expect from an SQL query. It's not actually SQL. It's just the ability to write a select statement, and FileMaker translates that and generates the data for you.
So yeah, once again, we are limited to the select statement pretty much entirely. Which means we can only read data, not write, edit, or delete data. So it's a limited tool. The other part is the question was what are some of the do's and don'ts with Execute SQL? So HBH, were you here yesterday on this? I just want to. If you're here if you were here yesterday, then I want to get more information on kind of what you can and cannot do with it. If you were not here yesterday, then that's fine. We can cover the material from yesterday, but I mean, effectively, the SQL engine in FileMaker is once again, and I can bring this back over here a little bit, Calvin. But the Execute SQL engine in FileMaker is not like some magical unicorn that does stuff, right? It basically has all the limits of FileMaker in general in terms of performance and speed, things like that. It does things a little differently, so you can jump over hoops, like once again, establishing relationships that don't exist, collecting the data, and then you're done. So you can basically find and read data with it. Which basically its power, but like suddenly, like say for example, you have a process and it has a hard time with 50,000 records. Well, SQL is going to have a hard time with 50,000 records too. So it's not like magically it'll handle greater volumes at higher speed. If you have a fundamental problem with FileMaker in terms of speed and performance, you need to look at lean design, other things like that. If you actually have 5 or 10,000 people that need simultaneous access to FileMaker, then you need to either set up multiple servers or you need to not use FileMaker, right? There are practical limits to what this application will do. FileMaker is now touting itself as an enterprise level software, but really the enterprise on the software is limited to about 300 or 400 or 500 people connected to one FileMaker server at a time. And so as long as enterprise doesn't mean more than 400 or 500 people, then FileMaker's enterprise software. So it's a change of management down there and how they look and view things. But the reality is enterprise software has built-in clustering, replication, all the kind of heavy iron stuff. I mean, by even saying, like, if you're in the world of Oracle or big iron stuff and you say the word replication or clustering and stuff, just break out the checkbook, baby, because that stuff isn't cheap. Now you could probably go with probably some other technology with AWS and get it fairly inexpensively. But if you're using like legit Oracle, I mean, Oracle is a really big company, makes a tons of money. Salesforce is a pre-canned solution, but once again, they have this enterprise kind of capability where it scales to like a ton of people, right? So it's just important to understand where all this fits. So this SQL in here is not a magical wand that makes things go fast. It just is. It gives the ability to really organize data. If you're already an SQL kind of person, it provides a friendly experience for you to do some data collection with it, right? If you're not an SQL person like myself, then you have to decide whether you really want to go down this road and learn this. If you want to do an ad hoc, get some data through relationships that don't exist on the relational diagram, then yeah, it's useful for that. I mean, Calvin, by default, you did some of this with the chart. Why did you use SQL with the chart? Was it what was your decision making for that?
The decision making for the chart, well, in this particular demo, I wrote, I think this script took me it was just a lot faster. I think I took an hour or two to put together all of these select statements, and to script that would have taken a lot longer. And because it's only a demo file, and we're demoing the chart more so than the select statement, it didn't necessarily have to run fast. If we were running this and there was a lot more data in the background, we might run into limitations with ExecuteSQL. We might have to run it with perform script on server, and so so there are limitations, but it is really handy to just be able to grab what data you want, sort it the way you want, and stick it in these fields for the graphs.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's we're heading up to 1 hour right now. Let's take a look at any other questions. There was a question on Twitch. Serinair, how do you manage empty values in your graph columns, i.e., one of the 3 states has no data for a certain month, question mark?
Yeah, great question. So in this particular sample, I wasn't compensating for that because I provided the data, but there's 2 different ways you could do that. And one way would be with the in one way you would loop through and run a select statement on each of the states, and if the value is empty, you would put a 0 in, and I've done that before. The other way is with this example of our left join. You'll see it's giving a list of all of the names, and some of these don't have any values in them. So you'll see Lyndon Bellardine does not have an invoice. And so the left join forces all of the values from the first table, or the names table, whether or not they have a value in the second table, the invoices table. And so in this case, you could generate a virtual list with all of the values, say states, and whether they have a value or not. And you know if it doesn't have a value, then it's 0. So great question. The join is helpful, and if you're looking for information on the joins, the w3schools.com really helps answer how that works. And just thinking about it on left and right, table 1, table 2, when we say left join, we're getting everything on the left, whether it has a corresponding record on the right or not. And so in the case of the example here, we are showing names or clients, whether they have an invoice or not. And the other example would show states, whether it has any sales or not. Good question.
All right, good questions there. Thanks for the help, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.
just stepped up the whole way. Calm, cool, collected the quarterback. Great read, good patience. More importantly, great job up front protecting this quarterback to give you a chance. And that's all you can ask for.
Trying to rally down 10. 9:25 to go here in the fourth. Short motion by Amendola from the left. Brady takes the shotgun snap, stands in, throws it left for Amendola, reaches up and snacks a high throw and lands inside the 10. Really to the 9. Ball slightly behind him, but then he makes the grab.